Evening. Welcome to our Bhagavad Gita discussion. Lenora, Sid, Gokula, good to see you this evening.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. We'll begin with our invocation mantras, and then we'll continue with our reading of chapter 17, the divisions of faith. Om Jnana Timirandasya Gyananjana Salakaya Chakshuru Tamjena Tasmai Sri Gurave Namaha Tasmai Sri Gurave Namaha Sri Chaitanya Manopistam Stapitam Jena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadam Mayam Dati Swapadantikam Namo Vishnu Padaya Vishnu Prestaya Bhutale Sri Mate Bhakti Vedanto Swami Niti Namane Namaste Saraswati Devi Gauravani Pracharine Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Pastitati Shaktarine Sri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Sri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasadi Go Bhaktaveda Hare Krishna Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Hare Rama 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 Hare Hare Krishna Krishna Hare Hare Rama Rama Hare Hare. So good evening, good evening, good evening. We are on the chapter entitled in Sanskrit, Shraddhatraya Vibhag Yoga, Religion by the Threefold Kinds of Faith. And this chapter contains 28 verses. And in this chapter, Krishna is qualifying the three divisions of faith, thoughts, deeds, and even eating habits corresponding to the three modes of material nature. So we left off, I believe, talking about the foods, if I'm not mistaken, right? Foods that are in the three modes of material nature. Um, I'll just read that again, just to reset. This is text 7. Even the food each person prefers is of three kinds, according to the three modes of material nature. The same is true of sacrifices, austerities, and charity. Now hear of the distinctions between them. 8. Foods dear to those in the mode of goodness increase the duration of life, purify one's existence, and give strength, health, happiness, and satisfaction. Such foods are juicy, fatty, wholesome, and pleasing to the heart. Text 9. Foods that are too bitter, too sour, salty, hot, pungent, dry, and burning are dear to those in the mode of passion. Such foods cause distress, misery, and disease. Text 10. Food prepared more than 3 hours before being eaten, food that is tasteless, decomposed, and putrid, and food consisting of remnants and untouchable things is dear to those in the mode of darkness. So this gives you an understanding of, according to the yoga practice, why food is so important. The sister science Ayurveda emphasize it tremendously, lifestyle and dietary, because it has such a profound effect. Krishna is saying here that what's the reaction, the result rather, of eating foods that are sattvic or in the mode of goodness? They increase the duration of life. They purify one's existence and give strength, health, happiness, and satisfaction. So that is, you see the result of foods that are sattvic, fruits, vegetables, grains, nuts, beans, and legumes, dairy, etc. These foods are all foods, when prepared properly, with the proper spicing, then they are very nourishing. Proper spicing is also important because proper spicing also assists in terms of us being able to digest certain foods, like, for instance, beans and nuts are, and dairy, certain dairy harder to digest than fruits and vegetables. So, if you spice them properly using spices like coriander and cumin and other cloves and other spices that assist in the digestion process, then the body is able to digest and assimilate them. And when they're assimilated properly, then they give strength and health and energy. Now, doesn't mean that if you're not getting strength, health, and energy from your food, doesn't necessarily mean that it's because the food is not in a sattvic mode. It could also mean that your body is imbalanced. And the result of the imbalance is improper digestion and assimilation. And that's where Ayurveda comes in to try to bring you back into balance so that the foods are, even the sattvic foods there, need to be properly digested and assimilated so they can do so. So that's a good indication of the health of the body, is what you experience after you eat. If you feel really sluggish and low energy, first thing you should check is the time that you're eating. And the second thing that you should check is the quantities that you're eating. Because if you eat too much, that's why Krishna in the Bhagavad Gita says, do not eat too much or eat too little. Um, Sleep too much or sleep too little. All of us, according to the influence that we have, the dosha, the predominant dosha that we are, we all have a unique way that we deal with the foods and the response to our sleep, etc. Some doshas don't need much sleep. Some need a lot of sleep. So it's a matter of coming up with the understanding of that. So this is importance of foods in the modes. Krishna says, passion, foods cause distress, misery, and disease. And ignorance, that's why a wholesome diet consists of fresh fruits and vegetables, fresh foods, as fresh as, and as organic as you can possibly get them. Foods that are canned, foods that are frozen are virtually dead. They don't really contain the prana that the body gets, the life force that the body gets from fresh fruits and vegetables. So even though it may be a little bit more time in the kitchen, it's well worth the investment of the time, the investment in your health by preparing your foods as much as possible, preparing them, and according to the Bhakti tradition, the completion of the cycle is sacrifice. The sacrifice means that you offer them from whence they came, and that's the Supreme Lord. And that, along with the sattvic foods, the proper foods, then the offering, the performance of sacrifice, completes the cycle, and it ensures that we'll be healthy, not only physically and mentally, but also spiritually. When we include the component of sacrifice in what we call offering of what we are cooking to the Lord, then it becomes prasadam, or the mercy, that which is given back to us. The Bhakti tradition are strong believers in reciprocation between the Supreme and the living entity who is offering gratitude and respect for everything that we have. That's an important aspect of our life, an important component in terms of our sacrifice. That when we say sacrifice, it means reciprocation, and reciprocation is done by recognition of where the fruits and vegetables and dairy and all that is coming from. So that is why the offering of those preparations that we make are very necessary in the Bhakti Yoga tradition. Okay, let's continue. We're on text 11. Of sacrifices, the sacrifice performed according to the directions of Scripture as a matter of duty by those who desire no reward is of the nature of goodness. So let's read the other, then I'll discuss a little bit. Text 12. But the sacrifice performed for some material benefit or for the sake of pride, O chief of the Bharatas, you should know to be in the mode of passion. Text 13. Any sacrifice performed without regard for the directions of Scripture, without distribution of prasadam, spiritual food, without chanting of Vedic hymns and remunerations to the priests, and without faith, is considered to be in the mode of ignorance. So those are sacrifices or acts of gratitude and acts of reciprocation. And then, Krishna is saying those sacrifices that because the mood and when you are reading anything to do with the gunas, the modes of material nature, piece it all together. We're getting it piece by piece, but when you piece it all together, you see the result of living a sattvic life and establishing a sattvic mind, which is one of the principles of yoga, is the establishment of a sattvic mind. You see, it's beneficial for us. And if it's done collectively, imagine the effects it'll have on society, how beneficial it'll be for society. So the whole aim is to create a certain internal and external environment which is conducive for spiritual advancement. So that's why Krishna is giving us this knowledge so that we can understand. You eat these foods, healthy, good for you, it provides a good system, all of this. And if you don't eat properly, then you'll be subjected to stress and disease, and then you eat foods that are putrid. I mean, just that word alone, eating food that is putrid, what do you expect the result is going to be? And sacrifice, same way in goodness. It's done in a selfless mood, in a mood of recognition that there is higher power than us. So there is this recognition that there is a personality that is in charge of everything. Bhagavan, Ishvara, the supreme controller. And that recognition is acknowledged by the performance of sacrifice. And here Krishna says, sacrifice, it is our duty. Sacrifice, not for, it's not like we're asking for something. We're asking for stuff. But rather we're doing it because of this attitude of gratitude that we are experiencing. So it's a matter of duty, and we really don't desire any reward, as opposed to passion, because passion, the rajagun, based on action and the results of those action, the rajagun mode produces a I want. It's a self-centered. I'm doing for my benefit, for my remuneration. So if I eat in a particular way for my senses rather than for the benefit, the whole psychophysical benefit of my being, but I'm just eating because this tastes really good to my tongue. And we see that when we're influenced predominantly with an external environment that's based on rajagun passion, you are inclined that. And that's the whole thing. That's the whole thing that's
Это
there.
урок, ты не
We
выключил.
develop
Lakshmi, we are missing
inclination.
you because somebody is unmuted.
I think
Can you
I think I
repeat?
muted it.
Yeah, good. Thanks.
Okay. So this creates that environment, and that environment creates inclination. So when one first starts out on their path, their yogic path, they may not be so inclined for sattvic foods. They may be like, wow, I really miss eating a hot pepper salad, or I really miss, eating this or that may be rajasic or tamasic. I grew up eating that. That's usually commonly the reason that one says, it's part of my culture. It's part of me growing up. I ate these types of foods. But the inclination, when one makes an effort through the process of yoga, the inclination changes. The influence of sattva gun is strong, and it changes our inclination to foods that cause distress or disease, or tamasic, or in the mode of ignorance, our inclination goes towards eating the types of foods that are healthy and wholesome and beneficial and are offerable, because the process of sacrifice and the process of the type of food that you are offering are very connected. That when we recognize the need for expressing our gratitude through sacrifice, making sacred, then that is in direct correlation or correspondence to sattva. So the sattvic foods and sacrifice. Then when you see sacrifice, what Krishna is saying here, when sacrifice is done in the mode of passion, it reflects the mode of passion eating style. It's for me, it's for my tongue. I'm doing it because I want something. I want something in return. I have motive. Passion means movement. So motive. There's movement. There's a reason that I'm eating in this particular way. But it's when you see, according to scripture, recommendations for what is to be offered to the Supreme, you always see foods listed that are in the mode of goodness. And if we are followers of the Bhakti Yoga lineage and recognize that the cultivation of the sattvic principle has to be there, then even habits that have developed over the course of time, your culture, like that, those habits can be changed. Those habits can be modified in such a way with the recognition that this is much more pleasing to the Lord. So sacrifice, being selfless, means that when I'm preparing these foods, is it pleasing to the Supreme? And there are so many stories in relationship to Krishna or Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, these prasadam stories, things that were offered to them, things that are offerable, and all of them are just sumptuous and wholesome. And one devotee of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, his name was Raghava Pandit, and he was known because when he offered his food to the Supreme, to Krishna, he made a concerted effort to find the best food, the best, um, groceries. In Sanskrit, they say boga, that which is meant to be offered. He went out, he found, even if he was going to offer a coconut, he found out where the sweetest coconuts, which vendor had the sweetest coconuts, which vendor had the sweetest mangoes, which vendor had the highest quality rice. He made it his sworn duty to find only the best ingredients. And we should adopt the mindset of Raghava Pandit. Yeah, it nowadays, we're all experiencing, I think, the pressure coming from rising food costs. I mean, now you go to a supermarket and you're even buying a few things. You can't get away with spending less than $20, $30. It's just the food costs are getting insane. But the principle being, this is the chapter, the divisions of faith. The principle is, if we are doing it with the intention and the desire to please the Supreme, then somehow or another there's always going to be reciprocation. And that is, faith. That is having faith that if I'm doing it with the intention, the expressed intention to make a good offering to please God, then there's definitely reciprocation. That is recognized, that is understood by the Supreme. When we bhakti in particular is the yoga of reciprocation. So as Krishna says, as they surrender unto me, I think this is in the fourth chapter, I reward accordingly, or I reciprocate accordingly. And it's natural, isn't it? In relationships that we have, if we act in a particular way, it actually creates a mood of reciprocation. Usually people want to reciprocate with you nicely, unless you have a boss, someone at work who really doesn't care about reciprocation. They're just trying to exploit you, use you as much as they possibly can. But in meaningful relationships, and that meaningful relationship will be even if you work with someone, if someone has that sense of, you as a human being and the interaction between two human beings and the reciprocation, if you're acting in one way, then, they feel inclined to respond accordingly. But those that don't, that means they're overwhelmed or overcome by passion and ignorance. They don't really care about reciprocation. They really are only self-centered minded. Okay, so the following 6 verses that we'll read now explain austerities performed in the gunas. So we're on 14. Austerity of the body consists in worship of the Supreme Lord, the Brahmins, the spiritual master, and superiors like the father and mother, and in cleanliness, simplicity, celibacy, and nonviolence. And celibacy, the definition of celibacy is even if someone is married, if one remains faithful to their spouse, that is also, according to the sacred text, that's considered celibacy. It's an ashram. And an ashram, whether it's the married ashram called Grihastha ashram or the celibate ashrams, which are the brahmachari or sannyas ashrams, celibacy is according to the ashram. So for sannyas and brahmachari, celibacy means total abstinence. But for the grihastha, for the man and woman in a marital relationship, the celibacy means faithful to each other, monogamous. So that's what is austerity. That's part of the austerity of a married couple is monogamy. And using the body in service for the Supreme Lord, because actually, when we say we're trying to develop love of God, and how do we do that? Through service. Bhakti literally means love and devotional service. We can say devotion, but it's more accurate to say, and it's included in the Garuda Purana, the Bhagavad Purana, and other Puranas, it's more accurate to say devotional service. That because devotion is expressed through action. So devotional service is what Bhakti Yoga really means. And, service to whom? Well, to the Supreme, making offerings, sacrifices, japa, or the chanting of the sacred mantras. This is also, it's called japa yagna. It's the sacrifice of japa, or recitation of sacred mantras. In our particular lineage, the emphasis, of course, is on the Hare Krishna mantra. So that chanting on a regular basis, that's considered japa jagga or kirtan jagya. If you are going to do kirtan, singing melodious mantra, the Hare Krishna mantra in a melodious way, accompanied by a musical instrument, in accompaniment of other like-minded people, that is also part of the austerity that we are performing, using your body in that particular way. Respect to the parents, that is considered austerity. And any senior personality, a personality that is senior in age to you, a person that is senior in spiritual development to you, all of these are considered personalities that are worthy of respect, offering our respect. And that is considered austerity, according to the Bhagavad Gita. So cleanliness, there's cleanliness is of two types: cleanliness internally and cleanliness externally. So externally, it means to bathe regularly, at least 2 to 3 times a day, depending on your schedule. For someone who works, you bathe in the morning, and sometimes people ask me if I'm going to bathe. I usually bathe at night, and this way, so I can get up and I can get to work right away. But no, that's not cleanliness. Why? Because the body during the course of the evening is detoxing. Each hour, basically, the liver is detoxing at 2 to 3 o'clock in the morning. The kidneys are detoxing, etc. So they're actually sending the results of the detox to the skin, through the skin. And that's why it is of utmost importance. If you can only bathe once, it should be in the morning, but best to bathe at least twice, because you go through the course of the day, and especially you live here in Florida, but in any uh, part of the world, it's always best that after 8, 10, 12 hours of work and activity, it's also best to bathe. So that's cleanliness. Internal cleanliness is the cleansing of the heart. And that's the importance of activities like japa jagna, performing japa, performing kirtan, performing swadhyaya, study of the sacred text, self-study. All of these are meant to cleanse the heart. Cheto darpana marjanam, bhava mahadavagni nirvapanam, to cleanse the mirror of the mind. And this is a very important aspect of cleanliness. It's internal cleanliness. Cleanliness of the mind means what you associate your mind with. Krishna says in the Bhagavad Gita, Dhyayato Vishayam Pungsa Sangaste Shubhachayate. Sangat Sanjayate Kama Krodha Vijayate. So what you sangha, what you keep association with, that is what you become attached to and like. You reflect what you associate with. So if you want to develop cleanliness within the mind, certainly the japa jagana, the sacrifice of japa, is very, very helpful. But also what you put your mind in contact with. What thoughts do you choose to come in contact with? William James said, is the beauty of the mind is its ability to choose its thoughts. We really actually have an ability to choose our thoughts. We can check if our mind's going way out there, going into a place where you don't want it to be. You have the choice to pull the reins in on that and divert it to something more sattvic, something more wholesome, something more spiritual. You can do that. And that will help, in terms of the cleanliness of the mind. And an aspect of the mind, of course, is the intellect. The intellect is the discerning powers. When we develop strong intellect, or rather purified intellect, we're purifying the intellect through swadhyaya, or the study of sacred texts, then the intellect becomes it is a stronger force than the mind. But when the mind is unbridled, and the mind allows to uh, go to things that are rajasic or tamasic, then the mind becomes strong in that regard, strong and resistant to control. Whereas in yoga, we control the mind, narodaha. Yoga's chitta vritti narodaha. We control the mind through the strength of our performance of sadhana. We actually control the mind. So the ability to control the mind is when we have a purified intelligence. The intelligence becomes purified when we're performing swadhyaya, we're studying sacred texts, we're hearing and reflecting, and also making the attempt to assimilate the knowledge which is coming from the sacred texts like Bhagavad Gita. Austerity of speech, this is text 15. Austerity of speech consists in speaking words that are truthful, pleasing, beneficial, and not agitating to others, and also in regularly reciting Vedic literature. So in the Nectar of Instruction, it's called the Upadesh Amrita by Rupa Goswami. He gives us insight on how to become strong in our bhakti practice. And in his opening mantra there, in the Upadesh Amrita, he says, Vacho Vegam, Manasa Krodha Vegam, Jiva Vegam, Udara Upashta Vegam. These 6 urges, if someone is able to control these 6 urges, then that person is considered a Goswami, a master of the senses, and not Godas, a servant of the senses. So those 6 urges are Vachovegam, the urge to speak, Manasavegam, the urge of the mind, Krodhavegam, the urge of anger, Jivavegam, the urge of the tongue to eat foods, Udara and Upashtavegam, the urge of the belly, just to fill it, and the urge of the sex organs, the genitals. So this is an important restraint and execution in terms of austerity. You see, first one that Rupa Goswami mentions is the urge of speaking, to control the urge of speaking. And this is an important point because sometimes we just speak too much and sometimes we speak too harshly. Sometimes people speak harshly in the name of truth. But in the Bhagavad Purana and in other places by Bhaktivinoda Thakur and other great acharyas, it states that truth should be spoken, but should be spoken palatably. So these urges are there for us to control. And when we control them, that's considered an austerity. And that austerity will give us strength. So what is it again of speech? Words of truth, words that are pleasing, beneficial, and not agitating to others. This is important. If we are speaking words that are agitating to others, then that is not really a good thing. Do you know in the Vedas are dead set against divorce? That when a man and a woman take a vow and get together, then that's a lifelong commitment. But do you know the only principle that allows divorce according to a culture, the Vedic culture, which is anti-divorce? It's if words in the home are spoken harshly. In other words, if the wife speaks harshly to the husband, or the husband is speaking harshly to the wife, that is the only stipulation that is given Chanaka Pandit, the wise sage who gives us guidance on how to behave in life, he makes that point. He reiterates that. So speaking truth is a good thing. It's a sattvic thing, but also performing the austerity of speech and controlling the speech is really important. Especially we cannot be overwhelmed by anger. We can not be overwhelmed by anxiety. We cannot be overwhelmed by the modes of passion and ignorance. And this is not easy. And therefore, it's considered an austerity. What helps us with build strength? Regularly reciting Vedic literatures. So these verses in the Bhagavad Gita are very, very important. If you can recite one verse a day, that will help you in so many ways, just to have the ability to remember one verse from a sacred text that was spoken by the Supreme Himself. What a powerful meditation that can be easily accomplished. What to speak if you memorize that verse? There are, I think, 800 verses in the Bhagavad Gita. It's either 800 or 1800. I can't remember. Sorry, I think it's 800. But in any case, if you memorize a verse a week, how many weeks are there in the year? 52. So at the end of 1 year, you'll have 52 verses memorized. At the end of 2 years, 104. 3 years, you do the math, and you can have an entire book like the Bhagavad Gita. And what does it take to memorize the verse? Recitation, as it's described here. Just reciting the verse over and over again. It's great if you can do Sanskrit and English, but if you just do the English and meditate on that one verse for a whole week, this is an austerity that produces great results, great fruits. 16, and satisfaction, simplicity, gravity, self-control, and purification of one's existence are the austerities of the mind. Santosh, contentment, satisfaction with what you have. Simplicity, as opposed to duplicity. Simplicity means straightforwardness, and not endeavoring to overcomplicate your life. Sometimes the Raja Gun pushes a person, the influence of Raja Gun is pushing a person to overcomplicate their life. So the life gets out of control. Therefore, regulation is really important. It helps to control the mind. The more you can regulate when you eat, how much you sleep, the time you go to bed and get and awake, as much as you can regulate yourself, it's an austerity, but it also is an austerity that helps to control the mind. Gravity. Gravity means being sober, thinking of things seriously, especially in life. Doesn't mean we don't have humor. No, that's not what's being mentioned here. There's humor in the spiritual world. Krishna used to joke all the time. There one personality, her name is Jarati, and she's the mother, I believe, of Abhimanyu, Radharani's husband. And she always had sarcastic things to say to Krishna. And Krishna would always joke with her and about her. And one time he said to her, Jarati, you're getting so old. Your face is slackening, and now you look like a monkey. And I think as a result of looking like a monkey, the king of the monkeys wants to marry you. And Jarati came quick, sarcastic reply. She says, yes, I know that the king of the monkeys wants to marry me, but I can't. I've already committed myself to marrying you, Krishna. And when the gopis heard Jarati's response to Krishna in a very sarcastic way, they all laughed and laughed. And, you see how young girls clap their hands when they get joyful. So it doesn't mean, gravity doesn't mean that there's no humor in your life. One of the eternal cowherd boyfriends of Krishna, Madhu Mangal, he's always joking. He's always wanting to eat something, or he's the one who originally made that sound, where you put your hand under your armpit, you make that sound. Madhu Mangal used to do that all the time and joke with Krishna, and Krishna used to joke with him. So spiritual life, spirituality doesn't mean that you're just sitting like this, in samadhi and quiet. There are the times for that, especially during japa, the quietness surrounding yourself internally, externally, like that. But when you interact with your friends, with your relatives, especially in my family, that was constantly going on. I had an Uncle Frank, that he would tease the kids so much. He would make fun of their hair. It was when I was a teenager, it was the time when we grew our hair really long. And he used to call us Mary. He'd say, hey, Mary, and he did so many things he would do. My father had a good sense of humor. So, it's according to your culture, like sometimes people say, oh, you shouldn't say those things. But culturally, there are things that are culturally appropriate. And my upbringing, my culture, anything went. There was always teasing going on. So it just depends culturally, what's culturally appropriate. But gravity means that there are the times where you have to be serious and think of things, life and death, and things that require some gravity. Self-control, that's very important. We've discussed that. Self-control, controlling the tongue and its speaking, controlling the mind and what it's thinking, controlling one's anger, controlling what we eat, controlling the belly, and controlling the one's sex life. Those are all parts of self-control. And purification of one's existence are the austerities of the mind. Text 17. This threefold austerity, performed with transcendental faith by men and expecting material benefits, but engaged only for the sake of the Supreme, is called austerity in goodness. By men not expecting material benefits, but engaged only for the sake of the Supreme is called austerity in goodness. 18. Penance performed out of pride and for the sake of gaining respect, honor, and worship is said to be in the mode of passion. It is neither stable nor permanent. And one of the first definitions that Krishna gives in the Bhagavad Gita of yoga is stability, being stable or steady or equipoised, samatvam. So that cannot be obtained if we are overwhelmed by passion. 19. Penance performed out of foolishness, with self-torture, or to destroy or injure others, is said to be in the mode of ignorance. So you have stories in the Bhagavad Purana. One is Brikasura, who wanted to, he was lusting after Parvati. So he wanted to come up with a plan to get rid of Lord Shiva. So he performed austerities. And what he did was he cut off flesh on his body and offered it into the fire of sacrifice to Lord Shiva. And he was cutting and offering and, quite harsh. And then Lord Shiva didn't come. So finally, he was going to cut off his head and offer it. And then Shiva came. He said, "You're performing these austerities. You know, you don't need to perform. I'm Ashutosh. I'm easily pleased or easily displeased. What is it that you seek?" So Brikasura said, "I seek the benediction that whose ever head I touch, that head explodes." And Lord Shiva was a little surprised and shocked. And he said, "That's the benediction that you want? You're performing all these austerities to get that?" And Prakasura said, "Yes." That's an example of the mode of ignorance. So Lord Shiva said, "Okay, so be it. You have that benediction." And then this weird look on Prakasura's face, and he goes to touch Lord Shiva's head. Because remember, his whole motivation was to get rid of Shiva so he could get Parvati. And Shiva saw this and understood, Shiva being very powerful and understanding one's mind, understanding the nature of Brikasura. He's running and he's running, and Brikasura is chasing him all over the universe. And they're going to various demigods. Shiva saying, "Can you protect me from this Brikasura?" And no, I can't do that. Only Brahma can do that. And he goes to Brahma. Brahma says, "No, I can't do that. Only Vishnu can do that." And Shiva finally goes to Lord Vishnu, and Vishnu says, "Don't worry about it. Here, hide." So Shiva hides, and Lord Vishnu takes on the form of a young Brahmin boy, and Brikasura is looking, and he goes to the young Brahmin boy. He says, "Did you see Shiva around here?" And he said, "No, I didn't." He said, "Why are you looking for Shiva?" He said, "Well, I performed these austerities, and Shiva gave me this benediction, and now I want to try it on him." And he said, "What's the benediction?" And he said, if I touch someone in the head, their head explodes." And the Brahmin boy, who was Vishnu disguised, starts laughing and laughing. And Brikasura says, "What are you laughing at?" He said, "Shiva. Shiva's tricking you. He doesn't have the power to give you that benediction." And Brikasura, who you can imagine how foolish he is, just to do that kind of austerity, just to get that benediction, just to get someone's wife. You can imagine how foolish he is. So Vishnu, with his potency, his mystic potency, he said, "Oh, Shiva can't do anything like that. If you don't believe me, just touch your own head. You'll see nothing happens." And Brikasura, he's totally bewildered, and he goes, "Yeah, okay." And he touches his head, and his head explodes. So that's austerity in the mode of ignorance, foolishness. And Brikasura was so foolish. That's what he wanted. So injure, self-torture, or try to injure others. Classic example by that Brikasaurus. Number 20, charity, given out of duty without expectation of return at the proper time and place, and to a worthy person, is considered to be in the mode of goodness. So, out of duty, I think there's no better culture than the Indian culture. They really, if you know any Indian families or you've been to India, you see there is really a sense of duty to give in charity, and especially to the proper person. When a person is spiritually advanced, that's the proper person. Because why? If the person is spiritually advanced, then that person is going to use the donation, the charitable offering, in service to the Supreme Lord. That's really not in service to my legal bills so that I can pay my legal bills. Yeah, I hope you all caught that one. So we know charity given in the proper time and place to a worthy person is considered to be in the mode of goodness. 21, but charity performed with the expectation of some return, with a desire for fruitive results, or in a grudging mood, is said to be charity in the mode of passion. And later on, I'm going to pull the verses from the Bhagavatam, the Srimad Bhagavatam, which describe devotional service influenced by the modes and what that looks like. It's really important to study that. So charity in the mode of passion. Me again, me in the center. 22, charity performed at an impure place, at an improper time, to unworthy persons, or without proper attention and respect is said to be charity in the mode of ignorance. Text 23. From the beginning of creation, the three words Om Tat Sat were used to indicate the supreme absolute truth. These three symbolic representations were used by Brahmins while chanting the hymns of the Vedas and during sacrifices for the satisfaction of the Supreme. 24. Therefore, transcendentalists undertaking performances of sacrifice, charity, and penance in accordance with scriptural regulations begin always with Om to attain the Supreme. 25. Without desiring fruitive results, one should perform various kinds of sacrifice, penance, and charity with the word Tat. The purpose of such transcendental activities is to get free from material entanglement. 26 and 27. The absolute truth is the objective of devotional sacrifice, and it is indicated by the word Sat. The performer of such sacrifice is also called Sat, as are all works of sacrifice, penance, and charity, which, true to the absolute nature, are performed to please the Supreme Person, O son of Pritha. And I believe this is the last verse, so we're finishing chapter 17. Anything done as a sacrifice, charity, or penance without faith in the Supreme, O son of Pritha, is impermanent. It is called asat and is useless both in this life and the next. So thus ends the 17th chapter. We'll now begin with the 18th chapter. I mean, in our next class, we'll begin the 18th chapter. And this way we'll be coming to the home stretch. And you should also be thinking, if any of you want to continue with Swadhyaya, study of sacred text, what text could we go to next? What text is next? You can think about that. We just recently had a program here at my house, and where we did sacrifice in the form of kirtan and the offering of foodstuffs to Krishna, and became prasadam, so we distribute it. If you noticed, sacrifice in the mode of goodness means that you distribute the offering. So my wife spent all day in the kitchen cooking and then offering it to Krishna, and then we spent the evening distributing the sacrifice. So you should think, what Swadhyaya, what sacrifice would you like to do? I mean, there are Sri Ishopanishad, there's the Upadesh Amrit, the nectar of instruction, there's the nectar of devotion, there is the Mahabharata. There are many different ones that are out there. Just consider, see if anything rings the bell for you in terms of things that you've always wanted to study. This one man who attended our kirtan, he was saying, I always wanted to study the Mahabharata. So, there are ideas there. So, open up the floor. It's 8 o'clock. Anyone have any questions or comments or would like to share realizations? Please feel free to do so at this time.
The Mahabharata is huge.
Mahabharata. Yeah, it's huge, but there is a version. I think his name is Krishna Dharma, and it's an abbreviated version. So all the extended stories and all that, it's not there. So you get the gist of it's still a big book. It's still, like that big. So I mean, but it's not like the Ganguly version, which are like volumes, and that's where all these little stories come from that you hear, which tell about Dharma and this and that. But I think we have the one, right? The Krishna Dharma one? Huh? Oh yeah. Yeah, I have it here.
I'm
Yeah.
sure you have an idea on this already.
Well, I mean, Prabhupada recommended, if you want to go by what Prabhupada's recommendation was, he recommended the Bhagavad Gita, like first and foremost, the postgraduate study, which is the Bhagavatam, but that's also huge. That's 12 cantos. That's a long, long haul. But he also recommended the Sri Upanishad, which is 18 mantras, and it is the Upanishad of the Ishvara, the Supreme. And it's also in our Bhakti tradition is considered an important book. And also then there is the Nectar of Devotion, which is specifically about Bhakti. I don't know, did Dr. Bryant do any of those? Do you remember, Eleanor?
He did Brass, which was the Amrita Sindhu.
Oh, the Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu?
Exactly. And
He did that?
yeah,
Okay. Did he do the Sri Upanishad? Do you remember that?
no, I don't remember that. No.
Okay. That's the invocation mantra to that is Om Purnam Mada Purnamidam
Yeah.
Purnat Purnam Udachate Purnasya Purnamadaya Purnameva Vasishyate. That's the invocation mantra to the Sri Upanishad. And then there's after that there's 17 more mantras. So that's a small book that can be easily accomplished discussion of that. You all consider that, see if you have any burning desire. I'm open. Another thing we can do, we could continue again with the Gita, only this time we come at it from a different perspective, exclusively the things that are stated in Gita that have specific relevance to modern day society. You know,
That's
for
interesting.
instance, for instance, the very first verse talks about Dharma, Dharma Kshetra Kuru Kshetra. So what does Dharma mean to us today? Then there's a section of the first chapter where you have Duryodhan expressing his desires or his kind of mindset in regards to the war, and you have Arjuna's and Krishna's uh, perspective of why they're fighting. So that's like viewing a situation from materialized and viewing a situation from spiritual vision. Divyam
I like that.
chakshus with spiritual. Huh?
I like that.
You like that idea? And
Yeah.
each chapter can be approached. It won't be the whole chapter, but it'll be targeted to things that are very relevant to the here and now. And I kind of like that idea too, because I was thinking that would be a good idea for a book.
Ah,
So it would serve me on two levels. Number one, to again have a reason to have all of your association. But number two would be, to put together research material for a book like that, and also to have recorded um, recordings of things that I can, from that I can take. So think
yeah,
about it. See what,
I like that
okay.
a lot,
All right.
especially because you were talking about speaking the truth.
Mm-hmm.
And no matter how lovingly you can speak some truth to somebody,
Yes.
people usually do not want to listen to truth. That is
Right.
my experience.
Have you,
I used to be upfront, honest, and I was surprised years and years ago when I found in the sutras this prevention of, well, uh, shut up if you cannot say it lovingly.
right,
And I was defending like my idea, say, it doesn't matter how you say it, the truth is the truth. And
right,
it took me some time to understand. And now you were saying this, and I came to the same point by saying, how can you apply a lot of these things that we are reading to our nowadays life, which is so complicated in so many ways, no matter what you do or how easy you want to live it?
right. That's right. So I think what you're saying is right. There's a lot of things that are we can kind of hyper focus on in relationship to, things. And I would like for it, if we do this, also for you all to come up with topics that you would like to see addressed from a scripture perspective, from a sacred text perspective. Something that you've been thinking about. How do I deal with this situation? How do I deal with that situation? Quite often what comes up is work. How do I deal with people, in work, who are not nice to me, et cetera, et cetera. So, it could be more interactive rather than me just lecturing with you all coming up with different topics, and we'll focus in on how the section of the Gita which we feel addresses that. That could be a way to do it. I'd be into that. So think about it, and we could talk about it next week when we get together.
Okay. I have a very, very small question because I was
Sure.
going through my notes and there's something that I missed the point. You were talking about knowledge, implementation, and goal, and you gave the Sanskrit words, which I completely missed. And I
So,
don't know where you going, where were you going with this?
well, I was saying the principle of yoga,
Oh,
sambandha,
okay.
gyan, abhideya, and prayojana. So it's knowledge, the process. It means implementation of knowledge to realize it, and then the goal. And that's really a 3-point system that's in yoga that I find to a great extent is missing. People don't want the knowledge of yoga, they want the physical. They so emphasizing asana and becoming good and asana and flexible and all that. But there is those 3 points: knowledge yoga, the knowledge of yoga, the process, which is implementing that knowledge. It's not just a separate process, but it's actually implementing the philosophy. And then the goal. Like a lot of times I go to kirtans and I see that yoga community kirtans. I mean, do they know when they're chanting Om Namo Shivaya, what is the goal of that mantra? What are the goals of these mantras?
I don't think so, because the latest thing I heard is that there are studios that don't want anything related to God.
Right.
And then you say, well, you're missing a point there.
Yeah. Yeah. Then why are you doing yoga? Better you do aerobics or Pilates or something like that. That-
Exactly.
that's what you should.
Or beer yoga.
Yeah, beer
You know,
yoga,
there's a beer yoga now.
wine yoga too.
One, yeah, so it's crazy. Which
It's
was
kind of
the
myth.
word for goal that you used?
The what?
The word for goal that you use in Sanskrit.
Oh. Okay. Sambandha is the knowledge.
Yeah,
Abhideya is the
yeah,
process, and
yeah.
prayojana
Okay.
is the goal. So for like bhakti, sambandha gyan is what's coming to us from Gita and the Bhagavad Purana.
Hmm.
That's the knowledge. The process is, the sadhana, the bhakti sadhana, putting that, putting the implementing the fact that in order to connect with the Supreme in the form of Bhagavan, that there has to be sadhana, devotional service. And that is very specific on how you actually serve God from the bhakti.
But you will
And then
call
what is the,
sadhana, sorry,
hmm?
sorry.
Yeah,
You will call sadhana with a yoga purpose, not a
yeah,
bhakti yoga purpose, but a yoga purpose. You
yes,
will call it
yes,
sadhana.
that could, because that's what Patanjali says
Okay.
in the Yoga Sutras. He
Oh.
gives the definition of sadhana, that which is performed repeatedly over a long duration of time. Yes, so the sadhana for bhakti is in relationship, of course, everything's in relationship to achieving the goal. And what's the goal? What is prayojana? It's prema bhakti, prema, love. So it's the process is on the Vaidhi platform first, and that means we don't have love, but we are doing activities that help us cultivate love, and then ultimately the purification and the attachment that forms, to chanting and all that will lead us to Krishna prema, or the goal of bhakti, love of God. Okay,
Thank you.
that clear it up?
Perfect. Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. All right, so if there's no more questions or comments,
Hare Krishna Prabhuji, Dhanavad Pranam, Jai Srila Prabhupada.
Jai Bharat Prabhu, thank
Oh,
you for taking
okay.
the time to be with us.
Thank you, Prabhuji, for the wonderful class. I just had a quick suggestion or quick
Sure.
input how we do the revision of Bhagavad Gita again. Like, how about if everybody, like, for first 20 minutes, reads like one verse each person, and
Uh-huh.
then you do the discussion, and then we do question answer.
Okay, that's a good suggestion.
That way, like people like me who miss like the most part of Bhagavad Gita, we can
Yes, good suggestion. Thank you for that.
thank
See
you,
if we
Prabhuji.
can implement that. Thank you, Bharat.
Haribol.
Sid, anything else?
No, I'm just amazed at all the depth of the information here. But there is one question that I do have, in I guess it's verse 8.
Mhm.
It has to do with the mode of goodness and pleasing to the heart. What is that? Could you expand on that a little bit?
Verse 8, foods dear to those in the mode of goodness increase the duration of life, purify one's existence, and give strength, health, happiness, and satisfaction. Such foods are juicy, fatty, wholesome, and pleasing to the heart. That means very satisfying. When you eat sattvic foods, they contribute to the mood of shanti, to the mood of peacefulness and satisfaction and contentment. So that means, because what is the heart? The heart is the seat of all desires. So when the heart eats foodstuffs that's not only sattvic but offered to the Supreme, then that combination is a total, complete cycle of events that makes it very satisfying to the heart, very pleasing to them.
Yeah, that's the only question. And I'll be thinking about the
Okay.
what to do next next week.
All right. Thank you very
Thank
much
you.
for that question, Sid.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. All right, everyone, you have a happy, healthy, and holy week. Until next week, we'll be starting the 18th chapter. All right.
Hari Hari
Hare
Bol.
Krishna. Hari Hari Bol.